that better? I turned it on earlier. I was afraid you were going to hear me doing all kinds of singing out there. But at any rate, tech team had to move everything out for the sunrise service and move all this kind of stuff back in. So they did a great job. Let's hear it for the tech team, okay? So at any rate, we had to, Ken Brothers walked up and said, we coordinated our ties today because we both got lighthouses on. And, as I was going through my ties, I got about 150 ties, and to choose which two I'm going to wear those 2 times of the year, I wear one, is kind of tough, But today we're in John chapter 6, and we're going to keep on going through our series in John. We're in John chapter 6, and it talks about the storm on the Sea of Galilee. And I thought, what better thing to talk about a storm than have a lighthouse, right? So lighthouses guide ships through storms, and so that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. So I'd just like to give you a little bit of an overview. There might be some folks that have joined us, or maybe they haven't been here through the series. We're only on chapter 6. We're going to go through the book of John. Actually, we're probably going to take a break during the summer, go something else, and then we'll come back and finish it up, or at least try to finish it up, maybe in the fall. But we're in chapter 6, and I just want to give an overview. If you go to the next slide, the verse that kind of gives us the core of why we look at this particular subject in this book is John 20:31. At the end of the book, he says this, "Therefore, many other signs Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name." So the reason why he's written this book is to give us not a chronological view of everything Jesus did, kind of like Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but to give us a theological view of the things that Jesus did and said that kind of support the fact, thank you very much, Mary, support the fact that Jesus Christ is God himself. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. Now, my voice gets a little bit dry, so I hope it's not going to get too stormy in here, but I need water, okay? I also want to go to the next slide. I just want to give you an overview of where we're at on this, and then we'll read the scriptures and we'll look at some of what it says today. If you go to the next slide, guys. I think it's big enough for you to see. There are 7 miracles and 7 discourses. Today we're going to hit the 4th discourse, a little bit of it, and the 5th miracle. The 4th miracle we talked about last week, which was the feeding of the 5,000. So you had the water turned to wine, the official's son who was about to die healed. We had the man that was healed at the pool of Siloam. We had the feeding of the 5,000. And then today we're going to have him walking on water. The discourses, of course, were Nicodemus, the woman at the well, the Jerusalem Jews. And then today he's going to go and he's going to start a discourse about the bread of life. And we're going to look at that as we go through this section. To understand today's passage, we have to kind of really remember what happened last week. And last week, we had a little boy who shared his lunch with Jesus. Now, he had how many loaves? 5. And how many fish? 2 fish. And how many people they feed? Well, 5,000 what? Men, right. Which means women and children in the crowd, so it's probably well over 5,000. But well, at least 5,000 men were there, plus women and children that he fed during this time. So, get this story. A little boy comes. He shares his life with Jesus, his lunch with Jesus. Jesus shares his lunch with the 12 disciples. The 12 disciples share their lunch with all the people, the 5,000 men and the people that were there. And then they collect the baskets, and how many basketfuls are there left? 1 basket for every one of the disciples. So they start with a little piece of a fish and a bread, and they go out, and when they're finished feeding all these people, they come back, and they each get a basket. It's kind of like, do you think Jesus is trying to teach them something? Because he asked me earlier, he said, who's got enough money to go out and feed all these people? He said, we could never do that. And so he makes sure there's enough left over after the feeding for each one of them to get a basket full of food and look at it and say, wow, that's what we started with. That was the picture that Jesus was God and had his control over food, okay? And as you look at these things we have here, we have the wine, which is creation, okay? We have the food, and today we're going to see him walking on water. So as we look at these, we understand that it's important for us to look at each of these lessons and what they're teaching us. Now, my question for you as we move into this section, because the section yesterday will be important, last week will be important as we come to the second part of our sermon today. The little boy, all he had was 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he gave them to Jesus. It fed a whole crowd. And I guess the question as we start out the day is, what do you have in your hand to give to Jesus? For the little boy, it would only feed him barely for lunch. But once it gave him to Jesus, who did it feed? Everyone. And so the question is, what do you have in your hand? What do you have that you think is insignificant, but that you can give to Jesus and will be a source of blessing for many people? Don't sell yourself short. Now, the people had heard this, and this is we needed to go over the basis for this for today, because we go to today's section in verse 15, and in verse 15 it says this: Jesus, therefore, perceiving that they, this big crowd, were intending to come and take him by force and make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. So today, let's look at the scriptures and let's read it through. We'll read through just the reading of the section about him walking on water, and then we'll come and we'll look at the second part of the chapter today. So let's all stand if you would, and I'm going to ask this side to read over here to read the first verse, this side to read the second verse. I'm going to read both verses for you as we go through these verses. So starting over here with the first verse, you're going to read the odd verses, and the last verse we'll all read together. Over here. So Jesus, perceiving that they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. Now when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, and after getting into a boat, they started to cross the sea to Capernaum. It had already become dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea began to be stirred up, because a strong wind was blowing. Then when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near to the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Everyone together? So they were willing to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. You may be seated. This first section is going to have a few lessons on it, but the main lesson here is that Jesus Christ has control over the sea. In verse 15, we're going to start there. It says he withdrew again. And there's a couple things that are interesting. Why did Jesus withdraw? He withdrew many times to the mountain. And I have the word ark up here because it helps me remember what he did, okay? It says in verse 15, the people are going to make him king. Now, if you're going to feed us all, we'll make you king. You know, going to give us all our food. But the thing that I think is important as an introduction, when he drew away, 3 things I think oftentimes happen. First of all, he was alone. Sometimes we need to get out of the crowd, don't we? Sometimes you just feel like there's too much going on in your life. I mean, especially in this day and age. You know, it's just like, can I go in the bedroom and take a nap this afternoon? You know, that's what I try to do on Sunday afternoons if I get a chance. But, you know, it doesn't have very much. But we need alone time. And Jesus, even though he was the God of the universe, sometimes needed alone time. In fact, often needed alone time. The second thing that was as we look at this section, we find that he needed rest. Not just alone time, because he was always with people. And that's tough, even for pastors. I mean, you're always with people. You need to get away sometimes. And sometimes us pastors, and maybe you even, don't get away from people enough just to take some time alone. But then we also need to rest. That's why even from the day of creation, God said, the 7th day shall be a day of... How many times do we rest today? I can't believe it. You know, I mean, it used to be that for us, at least in America, where we were mostly Christian faith background, Sunday was a day of rest. In Pennsylvania, we had the blue laws. You couldn't sell certain things on Sunday. Stores were closed on Sunday. You know, I mean, God forbid there'd be a baseball game on a Sunday for the Little League or so forth. Today, there are own practices on Sundays. I mean, our kids couldn't play soccer because they had Sunday games all the time. And so we just didn't play soccer after a certain age, actually the age of 8. Up until that time, we played in a league that was able to handle that. But we don't get rest, and we need rest. If you don't take the rest, you're going to not be able to be as productive on the rest of the time. The third reason why he took leave was to communicate with God. And sometimes we get so busy, and I'm one of those people too. We get so busy we forget to take time to communicate with God. Most of you know that my father-in-law, Pastor Brown, passed away 2 Fridays ago. And we're going to have his funeral here tomorrow at 11 o'clock and then go up to Vermont to bury him next to his mom. And he used to sit right around this part over here. Every Sunday he was sat here. But I will tell you, if there's anything that you can think of my father-in-law about, it was a man of prayer. He had a church, we found the church pictorial directory, the last one we had, sitting in his room because that was his prayer list. If you were in that pictorial directory, he prayed for you on a regular basis. He just prayed. I mean, you could walk in there and, Dad, you want the TV on? No. He's in there reading his Bible and praying. He was a great example, a much better example than me, of communicating with God. Jesus did it frequently. So as we enter this section, it's really not part of the section, but it's an introduction to what's going to take place here in this section of Scripture. We need to make sure that we follow Jesus' example, that we get alone time, we get time of rest, and we communicate with God. That was Jesus Christ's example. As we move to verses 16 through 21, we actually have the story of the walking on the water. And the first thing that I'd like to point out in verses 16 through 12 in this section is that as he walked through water, he was absent. The storm came, and we have the absent Jesus. It says in the text here, Jesus had not yet come to them. So in hindsight, as John's writing this, he said, Jesus is going to come, but he hadn't come yet. And the situation was these guys were out on the water, and they were alone. Jesus wasn't there. Jesus stayed, it tells us in some of the other texts, to send away the crowd, and then they went up alone to pray. And so he wasn't there. So in this section, we find there's too much wind and too little bread, okay? Too little bread in the previous one with the feeding of the 5,000 until they had the little boys feeding, and then too much wind here because it was stirring up a storm. And as we look here, it says that there's a detail missing that is in the other texts. How many people remember Peter walking on the water? Did you read that as we read this morning? This is the same incident. It is when Peter walked on water. You say, well, why didn't John include it? Well, because we looked at the beginning. What is the purpose of John? To declare that what? Jesus Christ is God. He doesn't need Peter walking on the water to prove that Jesus Christ is God. So that section, while being in the chronological sections in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, or actually Matthew and Mark, I don't think it's in Luke, it's not necessarily being John because John's trying to demonstrate that Jesus Christ is God. He's the one walking on water. And these guys had started across. It's about 5 miles across. They're about the 3-mile mark, 4, I don't know. They're right out in the middle of it. It's pitch black. Matthew tells us it's the 4th watch of the night, which is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. It was dark, pitch black. It was windy. The storm was coming up, and these guys were ready to capsize. They were done. And Jesus was not with them. Where was Jesus? Where was he? He's in the mountain praying, remember? He walked up on the mountain. He's up there praying. These guys, he said, he sent them over. He sent the crowd away. He sent the guys over. He's up on the mountain praying. And these guys are out in the middle of the storm. The absent Jesus. Without Jesus in our lives, things sometimes don't go so great, do they? These guys were out there without Jesus, and things weren't going so great. The light and darkness shows up. It says in Mark 6:45, and part of the example of this, it says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he himself was sending the crowd away. The absent Jesus. The second thing we find in verses 19 and 20 is what I call the unknown Jesus. For in those texts, we find that it's between the 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., and Jesus Christ comes walking to them on water. In the book of Mark, it says they thought he was a ghost. These guys have no idea that it's Jesus. They're going through and they're thinking and just imagine, I don't like darkness, but if you can imagine pitch black, that's what it was like in the middle. I mean, they didn't have the sea, like we can see Philadelphia and it lights the sky up. They didn't have any of that. It was totally pitch black. They couldn't see where they were going. The wind was flying, and all of a sudden they see this guy walking to them on water, and it says they thought he was a ghost. They didn't realize it was Jesus. Jesus was unknown to them at that point in time until he spoke. And And in verse 21, it reads this way. Starting in verse 20, I say, and he said to them, it is I, do not be afraid, because they were afraid. In verse 21, it says, they were willing, therefore, to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at land to which they were going. I call this third one, what a friend we have in Jesus. The absent Jesus, the unknown Jesus, and what a friend we have in Jesus. When Jesus shows up, things change. And if you don't have Jesus in your life today, things are going to go wrong. Now, it doesn't mean once Jesus is in your life, everything goes perfectly, but Jesus will take you through those. But without Jesus, you can promise things are going to go haywire. It says in Mark, let me just read this verse. He got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped, and they were utterly astounded, for they had not gained any insight from the incident of the loaves, but their heart was hardened. They should have learned from the incident of the loaves that Jesus was the controller of creation and all things, and he was God. But they didn't get it. They didn't understand it. And he gets into the boat. What happens when you can't walk on water? You start sinking, don't you? What happens when you can't feed everyone? These are the problems that were presented to Jesus. But when Jesus showed up, they got corrected. I'd like to share just 4 lessons with you and I could have shared them as we were going through this, but I kind of left them to the end. 4 lessons that I think we can pull out of this as far as Jesus walking on the water and being in prayer and so forth. Here's my first lesson. Jesus is always watching us. He's up there praying. But I really believe it doesn't tell us directly in the text. But the fact that he went to see them on the water and knew exactly where they were, I think Jesus had his eye on them all the time. He knew where they were. He was watching them. Joshua, my son, everybody knows Joshua. Where are you, Joshua? There he is back there. We'd go to the store in the mall, and he wasn't as right where all the other kids were, so he would take a little bit more trusting and a little bit more care in the younger ages. We go to the mall, and I'd follow him around, and where would Joshua go? He'd just wander off. He'd take off. Well, I'd have to keep my eye on him, and sometimes I'd just watch him, and he'd wander here, he'd wander around this thing, almost out of the store. And one time I was there, I would just kind of be following him. Anybody do that to their kids? Just kind of watch him walk through the mall, and he turn around and get behind something so he doesn't see, and he doesn't care you're not there. He's just exploring, goes all the way through. You can't find it, and he doesn't know you're there, but you don't take your eye off him. You take your eye off him for 3 seconds, and he's gone, and you can't find him anyplace. And that's kind of what I think Jesus was like here. These guys were out on the boat. They didn't know that Jesus was watching them, but I think Jesus had his hawk eye right on them. He knew exactly where they were. He walked right up to them. He knew exactly what was going on in their lives. Another illustration might be a police detective who's pulling surveillance. They don't know he's there, right? He's supposed to be incognito, but he's watching everything the person does. He knows what they're doing, but they don't realize he's there. And so it was for the disciples. And I think for us to learn, Jesus is always there. In Psalm 139, 7 through 12, it says this. Where can I go? This is King David from your spirit. Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the dawn and I dwell in the remotest parts of the sea, which is where these guys were, even there your hand will lead me and your right hand will lay hold of me. If I say, surely darkness will overwhelm me, and it did overwhelm them in pitch blackness, and the light around me will be night, even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to you. Think of that. Darkness and light are the same for you. He doesn't need light to see. We need it. We get scared. These guys are in the middle of the sea, pitch black, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. Doesn't matter to God. He can see them any place. He's always watching. The second lesson I learned, I think we can pull from here, is Jesus comes in the middle of our storms when we need him the most. He comes in the middle of our storms. And if you're taking notes, by the way, the back of your center fold in your bulletin is the notes for this morning, if you're writing those down. But we may feel alone, like Joshua wandering through the mall. He may not see me, but God's there. And he comes to us in the middle of the storms. And I'm going to read this, although probably most of you know this story, but in case you haven't, I'm just going to read it to you. It's called Footprints in the Sand. Okay? If you haven't heard it, let me just read it to you. If you have, I think you'll enjoy hearing it again. One night a man had a dream. He dreamed he was walking along the beach with the Lord. Across the sky flashed scenes from his life. In each scene, he noticed 2 sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to the Lord and one belonging to him. When the last scene of his life flashed before him, he looked back at the footprints of the scene, at the sand. He noticed that many times along the path of life, there was only one set of footprints. He also noticed that there was only one set of footprints at the very lowest and saddest times of his life. This really bothered him. And he questioned the Lord. Lord, you said once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way. But I've noticed that during the most troublesome times of my life, there's only one set of footprints. I don't understand why, Lord. When I needed you the most, you would leave me. And the Lord replied, my son, my precious child, I love you. I would never leave you. During your times of trial and suffering, when you see only one set of footprints, it was then that I was carrying you. And so it is, in the middle of our storms, Jesus comes and takes us through them. The third thing I think is Jesus brings peace to our world. And by I mean our world, not the world in general, I mean to our world, our individual world. Jesus brings peace to our world. When he got in the boat, what happened? And there's a number of different instances. The seas immediately calmed, and according to this, they were immediately at dry land, the place they were going. Jesus brought peace to their world. And so it is sometimes when things get all messed up and hard in our lives, we have to realize that when Jesus comes, he brings peace to the world. And it doesn't mean all the problems are going away. It's been a rough week for our family. Got, I think, 30 people coming in this afternoon in our house. I don't know, they'll bring them from the rafters probably, someplace like that. But, people are coming in because my father-in-law is with the Lord. And they're coming for a memorial service tomorrow. I would have loved to celebrate his 95th wedding, his 95th birthday. We were planning on that, but it won't happen. It doesn't mean that Jesus completely changes everything. We still have the rough patches in life, but it means he brings peace to our world. We know where he's at. And now I don't have to worry about how he's going to die. He's going to be one of those who's going to be lingering for, 24 months until they eventually go, or, what's going to happen? He's with God. Jesus brings peace to our world. It says in John 14:27, later on, it says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Do not let your heart be troubled, nor let it be fearful. Isaiah 26:3, you, God, will keep him in perfect peace because he trusts in you. One more verse, Philippians 4:6 and 7. You all know this one. Remember the verse I just read, peace I give you, do not be fearful? Listen to this section. Here it is, Philippians 4:6 and 7. Be anxious for nothing, don't worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which passes all comprehension, will guard your minds and hearts through Jesus Christ. He may not take us out of the storm, but he takes us through the storm and gives us peace. Do you notice that both of those passages, there was a choice, to be fearful or to be at peace? They were frightened by the ghost who they didn't know was Jesus. But when he got in the boat, all of a sudden they were at peace. Don't worry about anything. Don't be afraid of anything. Give it over to God, and the peace that passes all understanding will guard you. We have two choices. You can be fearful, or you can be peaceful. The world's fearful. They don't have the peace of God, but we do. Our choice is to live in fear without Jesus, or to live at peace with Jesus. 7 of our young men and those from Calvary preached on Good Friday. One of them had the section, today you will be with me in paradise. And he said something that I thought was very interesting. Paradise is where Jesus is. It doesn't matter that today you'll be in paradise when Jesus talked to the thief. What mattered was, it says, today you will be with me in paradise. With me. The situation isn't a location, but it's a person. And if we have Jesus Christ be in our life, he can bring us that peace that the world doesn't know and get us through the struggles. The fourth thing I want to bring out in this, the fourth lesson, is Jesus makes our end certain. It says immediately the boat was at land. It was there. Our end is certain. In Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, I've read it and quoted it many times. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. If you know it, say it with me. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Or in the New American Standard, he will make your paths straight. Do you understand? The end is sure. If we trust in the Lord, he will make the end sure. He will make a straight beeline for where we're going. And so the end for these guys was always certain as second Jesus got on the boat. They were at land. With Jesus, our end is secure. For the disciples, the end was where? The shore. For us, where's the end? Doing his will. For those who have passed on, like my father-in-law, the end is where? Heaven, paradise. He's there. He made it. Our end is always sure when Jesus is involved. That's the miracle of Jesus bringing peace to the storm. Now he goes into a section, and it's a longer section, but we'll actually spend less time on it, verses 22 through 40, and we find out that Jesus is the bread of life. And this is kind of an introduction because next week's sermon also talks about Jesus being the bread of life, so it's kind of an introduction for that. But let me just point out a few things here. Because of what was taking place, Jesus had gone to the other shore. He'd walked the water. The people didn't know that. So in verse 22 it says, the next day the multitude that stood on the other side of the sea where Jesus had just left from saw that there was no other small boat there except the one that Jesus' disciples had left on. So there was no boats there. The disciples took the last one out, last ship gone, and his disciples had gone away alone. So that means Jesus didn't go with them. So this whole section here in this next section says that they were looking for Jesus. But they had a wrong motivation. The first thing we find out in verse 22, I just read to you, no boat, no Jesus. They didn't know where it was. The second thing that I've observed here in verses 23 and 24, small boats seek Jesus. They wound up with a bunch of boats coming from Tiberias that were coming down, and they said, well, here's some more boats. Let's take these boats and we'll go over. We know Jesus is from around Capernaum. Let's go over to Capernaum. So they hopped in the small boats and they started seeking Jesus. And verses 22 and 23 talk about that, or 23 and 24, excuse me. And then the third thing we find in verses 25 and 26 is they find the right person for the wrong reason. The right person for the wrong reason. Let me just read these two verses. And when they found Jesus on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you get here? What that really meant is, how did you get here, I think? We know you were on this side of the river, well, this side of the lake. They left. When did you get here? Did you walk around the lake? You had to run. How did this happen? Verse 26, and Jesus answered and said, truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me not because you saw signs or miracles or the feeding of the 5,000, but because you ate of the loaves and were filled. You're looking for me because you want more food. You want what you can get and what you have to earn right now. You're going to make me king because you think I can provide you food all your lives. You got your sights on the wrong thing, much like the Samaritan woman. When Jesus talked to her, he said, I can give you living water. And what'd she say? Give me that living water so I don't have to come here and draw water anymore. She was thinking physical water. And these people were thinking physical bread. Now, this is delving a little bit into some dangerous territory for me probably, but this is what politics is all about, isn't it? You look at the elections. It's who can give you the most for the least, right? Right? That's what it's all about. They saw Jesus gave them bread, so they wanted to go make him king so he would continue to give them bread. It's what can you give me? Can you give me free college? Can you give me free food? Can you give me free? They got the whole list of things. I got so enamored with this. They want to promise us prosperity. What's the most they can put in our pockets? That's what we vote for, How much handouts? Free health care, free child care, free college, improved stock prices, better retirement, less taxes. All this stuff that's what they offer. And we're going to vote for the person that promises the most stuff, right? That's what they were doing. They were voting for Jesus. He can give us the most stuff. We should be voting for what the scriptures say, the moral stuff. We ought to be thinking about, what about life in the womb? What about other stuff? But so many times we get caught in this thing. Vote for the person that will give you the most. Now, I don't know how many of you want free college, and I'm not talking about any particular candidate here. I don't know how much you want free college. My bet is that if you already have a college degree, or you're 35 or 45 or older, you probably don't care about free college unless your kids are going to get the free college, so you don't have to pay for it, right? Because it's what we want. We're going for the free stuff, and that's what they wanted. They wanted Jesus because he was going to give them all this free stuff. We should be thinking about the moral stuff. We should be thinking, what would Jesus do? Not how much can I put in my pocket. Jesus was more concerned about why they were there than how he got there. They wanted to know how he got there. But he wants to say, why are you here? Are you here just for the free bread? That's the wrong reason. You should be coming to me because I am the bread of life. He says that in 35. Jesus said to them, I'm the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not hunger, but he who believes in me shall never thirst. But I say to you that you have seen me, and yet you do not believe. So let me just give you a little bit of an outline here as we go through. First of all, we have here the wrong bread now. And what is God's work? They ask him in verse 28 and 29. They ask him, I think this is ironic. This is what they ask him. They said therefore to him, what shall we do that we may work the works of God? And Jesus answered and said, this is the work of God, that you believe in him who sent me. You can't do anything, you just believe. If you're here today, you can't work to get to heaven. It's just a matter of believing. That's how you get to heaven. And then he goes in verse 30 and 31. Listen to this. Then they said therefore to him, what then do you do for a sign or a miracle that we may see and believe in you? What work do you perform? Our fathers ate manna in the wilderness, as it was written. He gave them bread out of the heaven to eat. Can you see the irony of this? Do you see this? These people just saw him feed 5,000 men, plus women and children, from 5 loaves and 2 fish. And they all got fed. And they're chasing him down because he gave them all this food. And now he says, believe in me for my works. And they say, what? Show us a sign. I just fed 5,000 men and all of you people, and now you want another sign? These people were just all messed up because the people that are not believing always want more. They want more. They won't believe what's right in front of them. And that's why coming to Jesus is coming to him by faith. If we have to try to prove it and show it, I mean, we try that every day. But as Nate said in the sunrise service, the preaching of the cross is to those who are perishing foolishness. But to us who are being saved is the power of God. Sometimes you just can't explain it. These people just saw a sign and now they want another sign. And in verse 32 and 34, give us your bread. He says, I'm the bread of life. And so then they say in verse 33, for the bread of life as that comes down of heaven. They said to him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. They wanted more bread. They didn't want Jesus. They didn't realize what he was saying. I am the bread of life. You need me. And then verses 35 through 40, the ending of this morning, it says we have the right bread. So we go from, as we're looking through this section, from the wrong motivation to the wrong bread, now finally in verses 35 to 40, the right bread. I am the bread of life. This is the first of 7 words, another 7, that is I am. I am the bread. There are number 6 more I ams coming in John. But I am the bread of life is the first one. In Exodus 3:14, God said to Moses, when he said, who should I tell the people that sent me? He says this, I am who I am. This is God speaking. He said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent you. I think when Jesus says, I am the bread of life, there's a connection between that Old Testament God that Israel should be thinking about and him. Verses 38 and 39 says, I've come down from heaven. You want the bread that comes from heaven? I've come down from heaven. I'm God. I've come to you. And then in verse 40, my Father's will. That's what he wants done. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who believes the Son and believes in him, God, may have eternal life. Him, Jesus Christ, has eternal life, and I myself will raise up on the last day. As we close this morning, verses 37 and 34 end this section. And I think they're so key. Listen to what these 2 verses say again. All that the Father gives me shall come to me, and the one who comes to me I will certainly not cast out. For this is the will of the Father, that everyone who beholds the Son and believes in me may have eternal life. That's what the whole thing's about. God wants you to have eternal life. And eternal life doesn't start when you die. It starts right the second you accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. He wants you to have him. You can't trust him as you walk through the waters if you don't have him first. And that's what this section is about. This morning, on Easter, will you say, I'm willing to believe in him? That's all it takes. To receive him as my Savior. If you do that today, you will have Jesus in your life. He will take away your sins, make you one of his children, and allow you to live eternally with God. Because paradise is being with Jesus. And if you accept him, he's with you every day, now, and in the future. As I think of these words, and this ends, my theme for this morning that you take away with you is the bread of life walks with his own through the storms of life. The bread of life walks with his own through the storms of life. We focus on the storms when we really should be focusing on the bread. We focus on the fear of what life is like when we really ought to be focusing on the peace that Jesus Christ gives us as our Savior. My peace I give to you. That's what Jesus says to us. Are you on your own, or do you have the bread of eternal life? That's where he closes this morning. And by the way, I want to close with this last verse 40 because I think it's so interesting. You say, does this have to do with Easter? Well, I didn't plan it this way, okay? This was the normal text we were preaching on through this thing. But listen to that 40th verse, the last phrase. It says this: everyone who believes the Son and believes in him, Jesus Christ, may have eternal life. And listen to this last phrase. And I myself will raise him up on the last day. This text, by coincidence, I didn't plan it, ends with a resurrection. That's the truth of this. If we accept Jesus Christ as the bread of life, we get to be risen in the end. Death is only separation from body and spirit, but we will be raised. We will be united with our bodies and live in heaven with Jesus. Do you believe? If you don't, this morning is the day that you should talk to someone here. Talk to myself, talk to some of the other pastors, ask anybody, where's their pastor, where's their person that I can talk to, because there's a lot of people in here that could direct you on how to get to know Jesus Christ. That's the most important thing as we leave. If you're a believer today, we have the last sentence there to rejoice in. I will raise you up in the last day. That's where we're headed. Everything that happens between and them will eventually be inconsequential, because when we get to heaven, we won't be worried about what we did here. We'll be with Jesus. Dear Lord, we thank you for your love for us. We thank you for the resurrection, the promise that you will come again and receive us to yourselves. We celebrate today your resurrection, and that is the proof that you will come back and fulfill this very last verse that you have in this section, and that you will raise us in the last day. We thank you for your love. As you send us out today, may we be a testimony and witness to those family members that are coming to our house. As we have maybe a meal, let us be able to have maybe read a few verses of Scripture about the resurrection, or say a prayer, or in some way testify to them that the most important thing today is not the thing that we're eating on the Easter table this afternoon, but it's being in the presence of Jesus. Amen.